Welcome to this week's edition of Trading Bits and Bytes. I'm Susan Littlefield. We are going to take a variety of looks at the trade friction that's been going on in the trade. What's going on with China and how is that factoring in with the U.S. and a return to demand. So to find out all the information, we're inviting Mike Zuzolo to join us. He's with Global Commodity Analytics. And Mike, thanks so much for joining us on Bits and Bytes today. Let's talk about this trade friction and the return to demand. What are you seeing for our producers?
We are getting that return to demand, Susan. I think it's really nice to see from a standpoint that the crude oil markets have been able to recover a lot of their losses. You know, when you think about them being down $40 a barrel and now being up almost to $40 a barrel in New York, that puts you at a net change of almost $80 a barrel, and that's what we typically move in about a year and a half time span. So I felt like that is really a positive move, and I felt like USDA's report, both with ethanol and also with the feed side of the equation, were positive moves. And indeed, we do see that ethanol production now is 23% off of its lows from several weeks back. We're seeing ethanol plants come back on. Red meat production for beef, it was up about 10% from the prior week, still down about 23% versus the same week last year. But pork's coming along a lot nicer, up 19% versus the prior week, and now only down about 9.5% from when we were the same week last year. I think the key to blend into this is that the market's not reacting in agriculture commodities like it has been with the energy markets, like it has been with the stock market, and I think that's mainly because they're still very worried about the big supply issues that the USDA gave us in terms of U.S. ending stocks. But maybe even more importantly than that, they're more worried about the trade frictions coming back, especially in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, and trying to come back from that and getting away from those big numbers, and China being responsible in the Trump administration's mindset for what we're looking at for why this had to happen. So all of a sudden we have the Phase 1 trade deal being talked about in the trade again, and just this week we also have being talked about again the fact that USMCA may be on the table because of the Mexican cattle talk that the administration put out about not importing cattle and maybe breaking trade agreements from those countries that we do, which that's pretty much a bullseye on Mexico.
You know, and it makes it interesting as you look at the whole scheme of everything, the fact that we're starting to see the ethanol demand pick up, which is good news for these small communities. But then we see the things coming out of Washington, D.C., which puts up more red flags for folks as they try to figure out how to market and move forward.
Yes, and that's why I did a pretty brief special report just this past weekend talking specifically about that we are bringing demand back, but we're also resurrecting these trade frictions, and that's not going to be healthy for the rural America. It's not going to be healthy for our industry, and it's not going to be healthy for the Trump administration's reelection bid, if you ask me. And I say that not just because of the policy move of potentially, creating another recessionary impact in the middle of the country and in his voting base that could possibly turn off voters in our part of the country from going and voting for him. I'm not saying they'd vote for the opposite side, but they may just not show up at the polls. I think the other dynamic that I really delved into is what would China, for instance, do in this time period if we did try and push the envelope a little bit on the trade again in reaction to the COVID. And if I were sitting with the president, I would say, don't do this until after you win re-election, because there's probably no one that wants you to lose more than China and China's leadership right now. And I think we may even start to see some of this type of mindset and opinion that I have manifest itself as China meets in its very large National Assembly this week, as a matter of fact, which had been delayed by COVID. And this is the big legislative Communist Party body meeting that really drives the policy from here on out. And I think they would work very, very hard in helping not get President Trump a second term, because they realize he's a barrier to their desire and to their strategic plan.
Well, lots of great things to look at as we market forward and head into the week. Have a great Memorial Day weekend with your family, Mike.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all those veterans that saved us by giving up their lives.
Thank you so much. Mike Zuzolo joining us this week on Trading Bits and Bytes. I'm Susan Littlefield.